Hello, welcome to Casual Veteran Gamer, and today's video is a bit different. This is the first time I've tried something like this. Since we are now getting to the end of patch 5, patch 6 is just around the corner, I thought I would rank my builds from patch 5. Before I get into that, I want to say thank you for all of your comments that you've been leaving on my videos. Some of these builds here wouldn't have been made if it hadn't been for your comments, and in fact this video itself was requested by a commenter quite a while ago, but I thought I'd make a few builds before making a sort of tier list. Now, they'd asked for a ranking of my builds, my own personal thoughts on builds that I've been releasing. I thought I'd use Tier Maker. Apparently, all the cool kids like it. So what I've got down below are all the builds I have released during patch 5. I'm going to go through them in chronological order. As I go through each build, I'll be giving you a quick recap of the builds and a little bit of gameplay from each of the characters there. I will mostly be basing the builds based upon, first of all, combat effectiveness, how well they perform in combat at the job that they're designed for, and also how easy it is to actually make the build, because some of these builds don't come online until very late and require very specific items which will lock you out of other items in particular slots. One thing I'm not going to take into consideration is their roleplay value, because I feel that is a very personal thing where there is a tiefling fighter here that deals lots of fire damage. One person might think it's cliched, another person might think it's an amazing sort of character to have a go at. So I'm not saying that roleplay value isn't important, it's just a very personal thing. And for the tiers, we've got critical hit being the best, as in this build is very strong and it will be very difficult to go wrong with the build in any of the combats. Going down ABC, critical miss will be that there's no point in doing this, it's absolutely useless. And before going through all of the builds, I'm just going to say there probably won't be any down here, otherwise I don't think I would have made a video about that build, so I doubt I'm going to put anything in critical miss. If you want to look at any of the builds that I'm going through, because I'm not going into much depth in this video, I will leave links to all of the builds in the description below. And please let me know what you think of the rankings after I've gone through them as well. You might disagree with quite strongly with some of the decisions that I make. So the first build here, Control Archer. This was the first build that I made in patch 5. I got all excited with the new Battlemaster maneuvers. There was trip attack and disarming attack were added. And let's have a quick look at it in the game. So the main idea behind this build is you create a fighter, create a Battlemaster, put dexterity up to 16. The fighting style for the fighter is archery. Give them the best ranged weapon you have. And then at level 4, you pick the feat that is Martial Adept. And you pick an extra 2 Battlemaster maneuvers. So you end up with 6 Battlemaster maneuvers. And with the archery fighting style, your chance to hit is always decent. And you've got all these options in combat and 5 superiority die per short rest. So here we are, again, fighting Auntie Ethel. I've called her Contav roll. What can we do? We could perhaps try and use menacing attack. It might miss. One of the benefits of this build, being a fighter, with action surge, there's no guarantee that the next attack will work. But try it again. There we are. Made it work. And we've got a bonus action. We have got Rally, which is one of the Battlemaster maneuvers that I picked. So maybe I think Astarian's in danger. There we are. So I really like this build, especially with the 2 Battlemaster maneuvers that were added. I think it's a solid choice, either A or B. One really positive thing about this build is it doesn't really require any special items. Most of this comes from class abilities or feats. It does a decent amount of damage. It gives great status effects. We've got Action Surge, and 5 superiority dice, which rely on a short rest. I'm going to give this an A. I was happy with this build. Throughout patch 5, I have been very happy with Battlemasters. The next build that I released was Stranger Danger. So this is a ranger that is dual-wielding Bugbear Morningstars. And they had Colossus Slayer and the dual wielder feat. Let's put it back down there, let's show you. So I've got all the turns at the same time. Have a quick look at the character. So strength is 16. And then they've got the dual wielder feat. And we've got these Morningstars specifically from Bugbears that do 2d8 damage each. This is almost certainly going to be leaving after this patch or next patch at some point. This won't last until the final game. So as we can see, I don't have quite enough movement here. So I've already got one of the downsides of this build. Dual wielding sounds great, but I need to use a bonus action to get there. I could either jump, once one bonus action gone, or I could drink a potion of speed. Bonus action is gone. Let's just jump for now. And the main point about this build is that when you hit, you're going to do lots of extra damage because the weapon is 2d8. Also trying to cast Hunter's Mark, which takes a bonus action. So 55%. 13 damage. That's not too bad. for an average hit, for a normal hit, 13 damage, quite decent. So yeah, the main downside to this build is that there are only a few chances to get the Morning Stars. You have to either disarm or use heat metal, I think, on any bugbear that is wielding a Morning Star, and they do 2d8 damage instead of 1d8. Another downside to this build is that currently offhand attacks don't take into account the ability modifier, which it should do for the chance to hit. So overall, I mean, dual wielding bugbear Morning Stars sounds amazing. Potentially doing 2 lots of 2d8. The ranger also had Colossus Slayer, but we only get 1 bonus action. I didn't give them the helmet of grit that can potentially give an extra bonus action. With that, it probably would definitely potentially be A tier, getting 2 bonus actions a turn. But I'm going to stick it at B tier. I mean, without the bonus action, it still does a decent amount of damage. You're still a ranger, you can still be using Colossus Slayer and Hunter's Mark. It's okay, but it's not amazing, and it's going to be taking out very potentially after this patch, after patch 5, who knows, maybe after patch 6. And there are only a few bugbear Morning Stars, and it's just not going to make it to the final game. It's okay. It works, but I think there are probably better builds out there. Probably recommend with this Stranger Danger build, maybe to make a fighter instead, because then you've got Action Surge, and if you make them a Battle Master, you've got 2d8 damage from the weapon plus a 1d8 damage from the Battle Master maneuvers, and then you don't need to worry about your bonus action for Hunter's Mark, because you'll often be having your bonus action anyway. So perhaps a fighter, maybe A tier, but I made it as a ranger, so it's going to stay in B tier. Next up was the kind of tank build, getting a particularly high armor class with a helmet. The idea being that there's a high armor class, so you're not hit very often, going to survive. Might not deal the most damage necessarily, but you're going to be able to try and tank some hits from the enemies. So a quick look at the character here, call them Tav. So they're a dwarf with 16 strength, 16 constitution, trying to get a high number of hit points as well as a high armor class. The armor class here is 24, which is fairly constant because of the armor, dexterity, defensive fighting style, shield of faith coming from the sword of justice, plus defensive duelist for 1 hit, and then for the equipment, so we've got shield there, just a +1 weapon, and the helmet takes away any critical hits, and then during the turn we can shove to try and get +1 AC. So this build is kind of okay if they are by themselves. So let's have an attack, let's start the fight. Got a critical hit, it was quite nice. I made them a Battle Master. That isn't really necessary. Perhaps an Eldritch Knight could make a good other choice. My other characters are far away, I guess. They're really far away. Right next to Anders, where Anders hangs out. Still surprised. She gets another turn. I should definitely shove to get the extra armor class. It doesn't matter whether it hits or not. You can attack, you might miss, that's fine. And then they'll get their turns. That'll be a disadvantage on the attack. It's going to be a miss. It's almost impossible for them to hit at this point. Even a critical hit would be a miss because of the helmet. So everyone's going to swarm around, get close to me. It's going to be a miss. Armor class is 23 now, because defensive duelist only works for 1 hit. I'm Solnum, which kind of sucks. Another miss. So I mean, you know, as a tank, as it were, this seems like it's great. I'd say it's okay. Our attacking stat is 16 maximum. Instead of fighter, so we still get action surge. A Battle Master, I don't need to use any Battle Master maneuvers right now, necessarily. But to get all this, we have to take the defensive duelist feat. We have to take the defensive fighting style, and if there were any of my teammates around, the AI goes after easier to hit targets first, which kind of makes sense. And reactions have to be used for defensive duelists, so they might not get many opportunity attacks, and they're not immune, as we can see there. So I kind of like the idea. I came up with the idea after trying to get the highest possible armor class, but I don't think it makes a good character in a team. Make it C tier. It's not complete trash. It's not a complete critical miss. But it just, in this game, it doesn't get the opportunity to do what it's really designed for. Next up is the Wizard Blaster, who I should have called the Blastard. That was told to me much later. I feel a bit disappointed I didn't come up with that name myself. Anyway, the idea behind this is that we have a wizard with the headband of intellect. You can see it on them there in the thumbnail. And at level 4, they take the Magic Initiate Warlock feat and pick up Hex. And there are a few items here. The Gloves of Flint and Steel, Warped Headband of Intellect, the Ring of Fire, Ilmater's Aid. We could have perhaps also had Leviathar's Blessing. I didn't put that on this build, but it could have been a potential candidate. So the idea here is we apply Hex, which is currently bugged, and we can do that 6 times per long rest. Use a Fire spell, and because we are lower than half hit points, if any of these hit, they're going to get an extra 1d4 force damage. As well as, I think only one of those hit. Let's have a quick look. So, hit them for 6 damage, and then because of the ring, 1 damage, the Hook Horror made a saving throw, but there's some extra damage done because of Strength and Suffering. That comes from the necklace. And then some extra damage from Hex. So you can really get quite a decent amount of damage coming out here. We've also got Hellish Rebuke on as well. So I don't want to heal Tav, otherwise they'll lose their Strength and Suffering. Perhaps I can Bless instead. And down she goes and she's going to die. Alright, let's come back to here then. So what do I think? I like the idea of stacking the items. They work really well together. Damage can be really good. However, we are relying on being at a low hit points, which isn't ideal. You're not always in control of what the enemy's going to be doing, but the damage output is good. One of the downside though is that it does require very specific items, and there isn't much freedom to do much else with the build. So I'm going to leave it at B tier. It does decently. It's not a bad choice. The main downside is that there's just not much variety or customization available for the build. We need these particular items, and we're stuck at 18 intelligence because of the Headband of Intellect. For example, we need the Headband of Intellect, Warped Headband of Intellect, which means we can't have the Warhorn. We can't summon the Ogres. We're forced into a certain choice, which is something the Control Archer doesn't quite do. We don't need any particular items. We're not being forced down a particular story route. Like I said, I don't want to put too much of an emphasis on roleplay value, because that is a very personal choice. But this locks you out of certain choices, and also means you can't equip any other items that you might like to have on your characters. But decent build. I enjoyed it when I was making it. Next up is a Warlock, which I called Charistavic, and on the thumbnail was thank you, Volo. Now the reason for that is that we needed Volo's Eye to get Charisma up to 20. It's 15 base, plus 2 from class, plus 2 from race, plus 1 from Volo's Ersatz Eye. I think this is the only current way to have a permanent stat of 20 in the game. If Auntie Ethel's hair worked, we could maybe get another stat up to 20, but this is the limitation at the moment. Other than that, that's basically the main premise of the Warlock. The Charisma is 20. They've got friends, so all their attack bonuses, spell attack bonuses, have got a very high bonus. And also in dialogue, they're going to be very, very good. Not only do they have friends, but their charisma is +5 as a base. So even if they're not proficient with charisma skills, they're still going to have a really good chance of passing those checks. And also with Agonizing Blast Invocation, they are going to have +5 to their damage. Now, just because, shut this off, obviously you don't have too many potions of speed in the game, but they are present. If you can give yourself advantage, basically what's the idea of doing this. Right, without needing to use anything else apart from attacking. If I was in a different situation, I may have hidden before attacking, but we did 9 force damage with +5 damage because of the charisma modifier. Oh, and I've got an extra bonus action. I should have used this first, but never mind. Always going to have Hex. There we are. Okay, the damage was lower, but the point is there that it could have stacked up to be even higher. Just happened to roll very low on the 2 damage rolls there. In terms of equipment, I also gave them Ilmater's, Leviathar's Love. So if they were lower than 30%, that attack bonus would be even higher. I could have given them Ilmater's Aid as the necklace, maybe even some of the fire items, because I've got Scorching Ray here, and I've got Hellish Rebuke. So there's pretty much nothing that this Warlock isn't good at. And as a consequence, this is going to go right to the top. You can't go wrong with this character. Whether you're talking in dialogue or you are in a fight, it's going to be able to do well. I also do just want to point out here, to get Volo's Eye, you can steal it, you can kill Volo and take it off his body, or you can go through the story part where you get given his eye. So you're not forced down any particular route to get that item. And it is something that will definitely be available in the final release. Next build that I showed off was the Firefighter. So this is a Tiefling fighter who has got the Ring of Fire, Gloves of Flint and Steel, Circlet of Fire. Already got some Githyanki Halfplate from Lae'zel earlier, and the Everburn Blade. And at level 4, we can see the feat they took was Great Weapon Master. So stats 16, 14, 14, 10, 10, 10, fairly average spread. I'm at the Githyanki Patrol again. The reason for that is that when I was making these builds, I was often using quick save and autosave and made very few named save for some of the builds. And this is the only save file I've got from this build. So this is where we are. Now, this is a particularly difficult fight. It's 55% chance to hit. So I'm actually going to use a Potion of Heal Giant Strength just to try and increase that a bit. We can see she's already blessed as well. And then I'm going to try and use this. I don't know the chance of it. It worked, which is nice. So we did some fire damage from the sword, a bit of fire damage from the Searing Smite, and then from the ring, but also the Gloves of Flint and Steel also forced the saving throw, which is nice. We got some items that stacked there. And then as a fighter, we've always got this option, Battle Master, so we can try and do all the good stuff from that. It didn't work, it's unfortunate. And we've got Great Weapon Master if and when we need it. It's got a nice theme to it. Like I said, not speaking too much about roleplay value, but I can appreciate a good theme. The only real downside to this build is we have to go down into the Underdark to get the Gloves of Flint and Steel and the Ring of Fire. But otherwise, it's got a nice synergy between the Circlet of Fire, which comes in relatively early in the game, and the Searing Smite spell there. Great Weapon Master maybe isn't needed. Could have put strength up to 18, but I quite like it. Maybe I'm just a bit biased towards Battle Masters and put another one at A. You tell me whether I'm right or wrong with that. But I like it, it's a solid build. I've got Broodmother's Revenge. That doesn't really work with the Everburn Blade, so you could stick another necklace on there. And maybe we could give the ring that gives the AC boost. If we're getting an extra bonus action as well, that would make it a bit better. Next in the list is the Poison Warlock. So it's kind of another variation of Charistavic up there. The Warlock has 20 Charisma, Yuling Volo's Ersatz Eye. However, there are a few significant and enough significant differences to make it a different build. First of all, instead of relying on Agonizing Blast and Eldritch Blast, the invocations chosen were Armor of Shadows to get Mage Armor and Fiendish Vigor to give False Life on a spell slot. For good reason, because this Warlock does not use light armor. They're using the Poisoner's Robe, so Mage Armor gives extra armor class. And one other piece of equipment absolutely essential is the Staff of Crones, which will hurt the Warlock when they use the Ray of Sickness there, which is why we also have the Ring of Poison Resistance. And the Gloves of Power just for good measure. So the Warlock is ideally using Ray of Sickness most of the time. They will resist half the damage done to them because of the ring. So only 2 damage was done. It's not a huge amount, which is the reason that False Life has been chosen as an invocation. Although it doesn't heal you outside of the battles, you can give yourself an extra 7 temporary hit points, and that is without using a spell slot, just as much as you want. Same thing for Mage Armor. So how will I go about? I don't think it's as good as Charistavic there. This build relies on the Ray of Sickness, the Staff of Crones, and I know I haven't really talked about the future for many of these builds, apart from maybe a Strange Danger. This will not scale particularly well in the future, because at level 5, Eldritch Blast, suddenly we can do 2 blasts, each of them adding plus 5 damage. Also, we need a few very specific items, and we are damaging ourselves every single time. Maybe B tier, let's have another quick look here. But we can take the Poison Spray cantrip, but that is a Constitution saving throw. I mean, the Gloves of Power can help with that. The Poisoner's Robe here adds 1d4 damage to the damage done by Ray of Sickness and by Poison Spray. We do have a few empty slots here. I mean, I guess during early access, as long as you're careful with this build and that you don't keep using the Staff of Crones while you're about to die, I think maybe A. I'm really stuck between A and B. Maybe a high B tier. Just remember that it's poison damage, which is resisted fairly often by undead, by spiders. I'm not sure if the Mykinas are resistant to poison damage. Some dwarves are. If this was a different type of damage, if it was a different damage type instead of poison, maybe it'd be A tier. But the fact that you are hurting yourself constantly, though the build does mitigate that, which is why it's not any lower. I'm going to leave it at B tier. The Death Knight is up next, and this is a Githyanki heavy armored Warlock. Quite unique, very different. Uses the heavy armor feat, which I haven't used before making this build. This was sent in by a viewer. So quick look at them. Their charisma isn't particularly high. They're not relying on spells to do damage. It's all through the strength, which is one of the reasons for taking the Githyanki. The other reason is that they have proficiency in medium armor, so at level 4 you can take the heavily armored feat. So this is a melee based Warlock. I'd say most of the Warlocks that I've made haven't been melee based. So let's just take a short rest to make sure we get everything back. We've got Hex and Armor Agathis. I should probably do that first. And we've got False Life, which I don't think we really need. Yeah. And we've got Hex to do damage. I won't use Hex here because I really want to use Arms of Hadar. Nice critical hit. So this is a really quite different build. Very appreciative of the viewer who sent this in. Something a bit different. And that, for me, that's going to be in its favour, because a lot of builds that are really good are very... Ooh, that was quite a lot of damage there on a critical hit. Quite dangerous are those bugbears. So what we're going to do is mess things up. One thing I wouldn't actually do if I was playing through seriously, we've got Arms of Hadar, so we can not only be doing damage with weapons in melee range, but in a short area of effects around the caster. Cast Arms of Hadar, causing significant amounts of damage, getting some temporary hit points from Dark One's Blessing, and decent with our sword. There we are, look at that, 15 damage. So what do I think? I quite like this build. It's unique. Couple of downsides. One is that the spells you pick are quite limited. I could have used Hex, I didn't use Hex just now, but Hex would also work with this Knight. It's got jump as well, but one of the negative sides is that Eldritch Blast is out, which is one of the main, normally one of the main ways of causing damage as a Warlock. Secondly, currently using heavy armor is not so great in the game. The maximum armor class with heavy armor is 16, and then +2 for a shield if you're wielding a shield. I'd say currently in patch 5, I'd stick it at B tier. Once there are better heavy armors in the game, in the early stages of the game, I'd make it A tier. But then, once we go into higher and higher levels, the Death Knight here, this Warlock, doesn't and won't get extra attack. So its power in battle is going to fall off. So I think maybe overall B tier at the moment. Potential to be A tier in early access if we get better heavy armors. But in the final release, maybe it might go down a bit because we can't use cantrips really, which is how Warlocks will do most of their damage. I'm going to leave it at B tier. Next up, quite interesting and a slightly funny situation for me really, is in the comment section for the Death Knight video, 3 separate viewers gave me a build, all of which had one thing in common, like the build was built around, which was to have Flame Blade, the normally Druid spell, in the offhand, and then something else in your main hand, and then try to get extra bonus action. So you can swing your Flame Blade twice. So I'm going to leave this thumbnail down below. I've got photos, screenshots of the 3 different builds here, which I'll stick up into the tier list, because they are different. They're not exactly the same. They all use a different class as well. I've already just started the fight. So we've got the Druid here, High Wisdom, and they have Flame Blade here. Unfortunately, some of these items are kind of shared between the 3 of them because I made them in the same run. But the most important item here is the Helmet of Grit, which can give an extra bonus action. The Wizard here has got the Warped Headband of Intellect, so they can focus on other things at level 4. And the Warlock here has the Circle of Fire, which can give an extra bonus action if you cast a non-cantrip fire damage dealing spell. So we've actually got the Wizard here first, so I'll just go through the Wizard first actually. One thing I personally don't like about the Wizard is that the person who wrote it said, learn the scroll, learn the spell from the scroll. I don't know if Larian's going to keep this in the game or not. They might keep it in. At first it seemed like a bug and everyone's like, oh look, it's a bug. But we don't know if eventually they're just going to be like, you know what, it's a feature now. Personally, I don't like it, but as things go, it's okay there. So use a bonus action for the offhand attack. For the action, I guess we could use whatever we want. We could use a cantrip, we could use spell. Oh, I think we've got the Sapphire Spark here, which is nice. So for the Wizard, it's okay. We've got a decent number of hit points because of the subclass, but at the end of the day, the armor class isn't great. They are going to be hit with the potential to lose concentration. The Warlock here has to use scrolls. I personally don't really like this, having to go to find scrolls, having long rests, searching on the merchants just to get a couple of scrolls. But quickly looking back at the Warlock, it's another 20 charisma based Warlock, so even if I don't want to use Flame Blade, we've still got a decent backup with that cantrip. The Druid here, the only one that can normally cast Flame Blade, and the good thing about the Flame Blade at the moment is that it includes the ability score bonus on the hit roll, which other offhand attacks don't currently in patch 5, which I think is why these people came up with this idea. It's a bit unfortunate that these red caps are far away, but one benefit, I don't know if I'll be able to get there, is we can dash and still attack on the same turn. Damage is 3d6. When I was making the video, I had too many average and below average rolls, and I started to feel a bit unimpressed with the damage. 3d6 sounds great. Obviously, when it crits, it's amazing, 66. Can't complain about that. But there's no modifier like there would be for any other melee weapon. So what do I think? For the Druid, if we had the Druid with 2 bonus actions, I quite like it. With 2 bonus actions, we are potentially dealing 66 damage, plus the Druid can do other things with the action. Unfortunately, it does require concentration. A lot of good Druid spells require concentration, so if you're not wanting to build a melee Druid, this might be down in C tier. But if the point of your character is to build a melee Druid, I'll stick that at A. For the Wizard, I'm going to stick this down at B tier, because the armor class is never going to be as high as the Druid could be. And secondly, as a personal pet peeve, I don't like the fact that we're learning the spell from the scroll, and it's a Druid spell. Some of you will probably disagree with me on that. That's fine. That's what the comment section is for. As for the Warlock, I personally, well, part of me wants to put it down here in the critical miss, just because I don't like having to go find the Flame Blades scrolls. When I was making the video, it took me too long. It took far longer than I wanted it to. It's long resting, searching a couple of merchants. Okay, it's not there, long resting. Because the Flame Blade scroll can turn up in the Druid Grove or the Goblin Camp with the Zentrum Trader, which sounds great, but is really quite tedious, and that I don't want to play the game for that reason. With that little thing aside, if you're happy with finding all these scrolls and buying them and using them, I'd probably put it up at A tier. If Flame Blade was a Warlock spell, I'd probably stick it up at the top again. Because one thing that this Warlock has got in its favour, it's also got Leviathar's Love, is we can cast Hex. And then, okay, we've just lost our bonus action, fine, because we're using Hex. We didn't have to use Hex, but the point is here, we can, and do, have another source of damage. But that damage there has nothing to do with the Flame Blade. The Flame Blade is just an extra option, but unfortunately it uses concentration, so you can't use Hex and the Flame Blade. That's probably the main reason why I wouldn't put it up at critical hit. So that comes to the end of all the builds that I have released during patch 5. And looking at it, you know, got one what I would call critical hit, a few A's, although 2 of them are very similar, a lot of B's and 1 C. It looks a little bit disappointing. You know, I'm making builds to put onto YouTube. Some of these are viewer builds as well. And you might be thinking, well, why isn't everything critical hit? Why isn't everything up at A? But the point of the builds that I'm trying to release is just maybe showing you things a little bit different, things you might not have thought of, builds with a bit of variety to them. So do let me know, first of all, whether you liked this type of video, secondly, whether you, or how many of these choices you disagree with. If you made it this far, please do consider subscribing. Thank you very much for watching, and hopefully I'll see you in the next one.